What's up? What's up, guys? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. We are actually both in our homes, or Rob's in his studio, but close enough to his home. And it's good. It's good to be back. How are you feeling, Rob?
Oh man, great weekend out in Chicago, and now I start Porch Tour. It's the season of porches. PorchTour.com. Kickoff party in Mobile, Alabama, followed by Pensacola, Florida. Come party.
Hell yeah. And where can people go if they want to grab tickets?
PorchTour.com. There's a lot of porches up there, so find the porches closest to you and pay your tributes.
There you go. There you go. Go see the Porch Tour live. It's become a legendary event. I also happy Easter to everybody who celebrated yesterday. Hope you guys had a good one and enjoyed some good quality time with family and stuff like that. It was my birthday yesterday, happened
Happy
to fall
birthday.
on. Oh yes, thank you very much. Then thank you. I just bring it up just to say thank you to everybody. I got a lot of nice birthday messages.
50?
Not 50, Rob, and we're very close in age, and I don't really feel like that's an appropriate joke for you to make. I was turned 42 years old, which might as well be 50. Honestly, it's all the same at a certain point. But I had a great birthday. I mean, I did start it in Chicago, but I was able to make it home pretty early and had a good day with the family. So a lot of fun. It's been a wild and tiring couple of weeks for me, but it's nice. It's nice to be home. So anyway, and of course, as I woke up this morning, as most of us did, to the news that the Pope passed away on Easter, which I do not have a hot take on this. I really don't have much of anything to say about it, but that does just seem wild. Like the Pope dying on Easter seems almost like, oh, is this a sign of something? Did anyone ever predict this? And then it means all of humanity is going down. Anyway, it was a nice time. I hope everybody had fun, and my condolences to the Catholics out there who lost their Pope on Easter. I married a Catholic, so I've learned how to be diplomatic with them. Sorry about that.
Maybe the next.
Also, let's hope you get a better Pope.
Yeah, maybe the next one won't be such a socialist.
Yeah, it would just be cool. It'd be cool to have a Pope who's not like lecturing about climate change and stuff like that. Again, he can say what he wants to, but that's not the best thing for the world. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this story, and I will. We don't have I don't have too much that's on my mind right now. I guess just between a lot of traveling and being preoccupied with other things. And also it just seems like the Pope story has kind of been dominating the news today. But the one thing that we had not discussed yet that I really do think is worth bringing up is that it appears that at least according to reporting in the New York Times and other major publications, that is very much in line with what I'm hearing from behind the scenes. It appears that we came very close, really to the brink of a war with Iran that has been shut down, at least for now. Essentially, the New York Times was reporting that it is pretty wild that Israel drew up plans for striking Iranian, nuclear targets, whatever exactly that means. Is according to our own director of national intelligence and CIA, there is no movement on, like, Iran does not have a nuclear weapon and does not seem to be closing in on one. But regardless, Israel drew up these plans. The plans, of course, Rob, I mean, get this, it's just, you can't make this stuff up. The plans, of course, Israel could not do themselves. So the plans that Israel drew up involved U.S. backup and U.S. strikes as well. This was presented to Donald Trump. Evidently, some senior members of Donald Trump's cabinet were all for this, and you could guess who they are already, as Waltz, Marco Rubio. And from everything I'm hearing and everything that's being reported, it seems that Tulsi Gabbard played a major role in convincing Donald Trump not to do this, and also from the outside that Tucker Carlson played a major role in this. So it's according to the Times, the Israeli plans were to attack in May. So this is like, it's the 21st of April today. This is coming up in a couple weeks, maybe 2 to 4 weeks or something like that. Like this was going down, and Trump straight up thwarted it and was like, no, we will not back up. We will not back you up, and we will not help you with this strike. And he said that I guess they want to give Iran a few more months to negotiate before they make this move. So the threat is not off the table. But for now, at least, it has been, postponed or left in question. So I guess obviously, like, there's a lot of obvious takeaways from this, but since I've been fairly critical of Trump and been critical of Tulsi Gabbard as of late, I should give both of them credit that at least in this moment they didn't go through for right now with these, what would have been catastrophic plans. And of course, Tucker Carlson deserves just immense amount of credit for the role that he's playing. I mean, thank God for these few people around Donald Trump. And then it also goes, it's one more piece of evidence that the whole, what you might even call the Donald Trump doctrine at this point, which is essentially something like, it's a great idea to have war hawks permeating your White House, because then everybody's scared of you or something like that. It just seems that it's like, well, it's actually a lot more dangerous because you might end up getting yourself into another war. Although I suppose you could argue that, well, look, he's doing it. He's bullying them and then backing out. It just seems like a very dangerous game to play. But I don't know. Any thoughts you have on any of this stuff, Rob?
Yeah, some things of interest. One is, sometimes you can give Donald Trump too much credit for playing the 4D chess. You do wonder if in this case this was a intentional leak to actually pressure the Iranians of, hey, war is on the table, so it's time to sit down and make a deal. What would play into that is the fact that apparently the United States was sending bunker busters over to Israel, and then they were starting to station the stealth bombers, which also potentially for more strikes in Yemen, but seeming to channel that, the capability of a strike being imminent. So you do wonder if this was intentional of Donald Trump to get this story out there to try and poke at the Iranians to go, hey, you guys better cut a deal with us. And then, of course, you get the classic Israeli line of, if you don't back us now, then this will be our last opportunity to actually prevent it, which is something we've heard all the way back from the Obama administration, or I seem to recall hearing that from the Obama administration. And then maybe because you know more of the details about what the actual Obama Iranian deal was that Trump thwarted, but speaking to the experts around Donald Trump, there was a story making the rounds in the Wall Street Journal the other day that I think Bessett, is that the Treasury or whoever, seems to be the smarty pants. So apparently they managed to get around Peter Navarro and have a meeting with Trump and get him to trump the pause on the tariffs, because Navarro's been the hardliner on the tariffs. It seems like interest rates were starting to climb in the bond market, and they realized, hey, we got a lot of debt to finance. This actually, our system, playing a bit of a game with China of whose system is going to break first. And I think they didn't like the look of what was going on in the bond markets and said, I think we better pause on this, just claim that this is what we wanted the whole time, declare victory, and that people are negotiating with you. But for the people that think that Donald Trump is the grand wizard and always has some huge plan, it does seem like we hear stories sometimes if it's just who he last had a conversation with, and if they get them to just make it Twitter official.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, so a couple things on that. Like, number one, it's just like more broad points, but number one, with the with the Iran deal, really was it's kind of an interesting thing, because it was, I would argue, one of the best things that Obama did, maybe the best thing that Barack Obama did. And he had a disastrous foreign policy in many areas, a disaster in Iraq and Afghanistan. Kept both of those wars going. I mean, he did, end the war in Iraq and then reinvade the country at one point there, because his project in Syria had been so disastrous that it spilled back over to Iraq. I mean, it's you can't even make this shit up, like how bad it was. You had, I mean, there was lots
in the
of
Pentagon looking at ISIS going, you're going the wrong way.
Yes, quite literally. Yes. I mean, there were all types of reports about this. There was a major report in the New York Times about this, about how in Syria you had Pentagon-backed forces fighting CIA-backed forces, like just the craziest foreign policy you could possibly imagine. Of course, he overthrew Muammar Gaddafi in Libya and led to the catastrophe there. Now that a lot of people who supported that intervention are now trying to walk that back as if they never really did. But we got your writing. We know what you said at the time. But so, you know, and then of course, obviously his policy in Syria is a disaster. So then after his disastrous policy in Syria, he has to send troops back into Iraq to now fight on the other side of the Iraq, or of the other side of who he was supporting in Syria, essentially. It's just, the whole thing's nutty. But the one thing, and then of course the catastrophe in Yemen that he backed in 2015, but like the one good thing, and then by the way, part of that catastrophe in Yemen was, as Obama officials have themselves said, because the Saudis were pissed off about his good policy in Iran. So then he backed their war against the Houthis in Yemen to win them back over or whatever, to placate them, is the quote. But, you know, the thing, it's a little bit interesting with the Iran deal, because it's like, the whole thing was fake, but yet it was still a very good deal. And the popular kind of like Fox News talking point at the time would be that Obama gave Iran a bunch of US taxpayer money in order for them to get rid of their nuclear weapons. But none of that's real. It's all just made up. None of it. What happened is that the US had a bunch of assets. So for people who know the history just very roughly, in 1953, under Dwight D. Eisenhower, the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government in Iran and installed the Shah as a dictator. The Shah ruled until 1979, when there was a revolution, and this is when the current Iranian regime took over. And it's part of the reason why they hate our guts so much, because we once overthrew their democratically elected government. It's not the only reason. There's several reasons, but that's one of them. And so essentially, right, when just fast forwarding to the Iran deal, back in 79, when the government that we backed and propped up was overthrown, there were like some Iranian assets. There was Iranian money that we froze in international accounts. Now, this money had been frozen the entire time, and a few international courts, I believe 2 international courts, had ruled that, like, you got to give this back to them. It's not yours. It's the Iranians' money. So that's what they got back. It wasn't U.S. taxpayer dollars. It was their own money. I mean, you could argue it wasn't theirs. It was the previous regimes, but you're getting into murky territory here. It was any government that has money, they have it because they took it from their people. So a previous government had taken it from the people, is giving it back to the new government. You know, whatever you want to argue with that, it simply wasn't U.S. taxpayer money. It was Iranian money. And also, they didn't have nuclear weapons. So like all of this was made up. It was all nonsense. It was, we gave them money that was already theirs, and they got rid of a thing that they never had. But it did lead to a new inspections regime. So they opened themselves up for a lot more inspections. Essentially, the whole point of the deal was just to take the neocon pretense for war off the table. So it was kind of brilliant in that it called their bluff. You know, like the neocons were basically saying, Iran's developing a nuke. That's why we have to go to war with Iran. And then the deal was like, okay, well, they just agreed to a whole new inspections regime. So aren't you thrilled? And then all the neocons went, no, we're still not thrilled because blah, blah, blah. But the point is that they never believed Iran had a nuclear weapon. That was always just a pretense. And so they were annoyed that you took that pretense away from them. And this is part of the reason why Israel so opposed the Iran deal. So then, of course, Donald Trump comes in. He tears it up. Well, he said he didn't exactly tear it up, but he had the U.S. back out of the deal. The deal is still in place between Europe and Iran, but regardless of that, he basically tore it up because, like, you know, Obama's a loser and Obama's bad, and so everything he did was gay, and everything I do is great, and so they tore that up. Now then, Joe Biden came back in, and there was actually some pressure on Joe Biden. Like, so there was a divide amongst the Democratic establishment. Some of them really wanted him to get back in the same deal, but ultimately he didn't. And so now we're back to having Donald Trump in there. And now Trump is going, Iran has to come to the table. They have to make some type of deal, even though they did. And he's the one who backed out of the deal that they were already in. But again, essentially what all this, and this is really one of the major problems with Donald Trump, is that it's all so much about his ego and his achievement that he just wants to get them back into a thing now that was the Trump deal, not the Obama deal. So he can say, like, I made this deal happen. Now it's got, you know, a gold-plated seal of Donald Trump around it. So that's essentially the situation there. It's like hopefully there's a way over these next few months, and evidently we don't have a lot of time here because who knows, Donald Trump said no to him once, but who knows if he's going to say no to the Israelis again. Hopefully they can work out something in this time period to get back to some type of, you know, enhanced inspections regime or whatever Iran has to do to take this bullshit talking point that they have a nuclear weapon off the table. By the way, one more thing it should be mentioned is that even according to all the reports on this, even the Israelis were saying that these strikes would like thwart their ability to go nuclear for a year. So even they're not claiming that it's like, oh, this is one and done and then we're out of here. It's like, no, you're getting pulled into another prolonged war, which, you know, as we've learned over the last few decades, they can last for quite a while. We've fought the longest wars in American history in the Middle East, and there's no reason to think that this one wouldn't be another one of that magnitude. And also, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't be much, much bloodier for U.S. servicemen who are all throughout the region that Iran can touch. So anyway, catastrophe has been averted momentarily. We'll see where all this ends up going.
There's always just a lack of information from the Israeli government, which is, so what do you think is their current breakout period now? And so what do these specific strikes do to delay that? And what's the point of it if, I guess, in a year from now, you're in the exact same place? So then do you have a new plan for in a year from now? It just doesn't sound like much of a, I'm just saying, if you wanted to sell it to people, it's more of a sale to go, hey, these people can't have a bomb, and we actually have a way right now to do targeted strikes, and then that's going to set them back 20 years, and we don't even think they're going to retry it. That's a little bit more of a sale. Hey, we're going to push them back a year. Well, then I don't know. Are they in the exact same spot in a year? And then what's the plan for in a year from now? What are the odds that pulls us into a bigger escalation with them? It just it seems I don't know, a little bit too loose of a plan to even want to push forward with it. If you wanted to end their nuclear program, it just doesn't seem like enough information.
Yeah, well, it kind of fits into the bigger theme that I've been mentioning quite a bit now, is that you're just, you know, I think I said this to you, Rob, when we were hanging out in the green room in Chicago there, and there was one point, I don't know how we were talking about the show 24. I think you made a joke about 24. It's something about Janine Garofalo being on 24 and how wild that was, you know, in hindsight or at the time or whatever. And I was saying that, like, that the post 9/11, which, by the way, I was a big fan of the show 24. I don't agree with the propaganda at all, but it was an excellent show. Love Jack Bauer. But that period, it's like the post 9/11 period was the last time we had good propaganda. I don't even mean like, you know, there were some people who fell for the COVID propaganda, although obviously I think, as you could see from the result of it, the propaganda wasn't that good because almost everybody saw through it eventually. But like, that was the last period. It was post 9/11. Back then there used to be good propaganda. And like, none of these wars even have the good propaganda now. Like, it's just because it's like impossible. It's like, you know, the propaganda through the whole Ukraine war always relied on somehow saying that, like, listen, you know, Luhansk must be ruled by Kiev and not Moscow. And that really, really matters to you because, and you're like, yes, just, no, it doesn't. Like, that's just not good. And then the propaganda with like the Houthis, like no one's even trying to make an attempt that the Houthis pose some threat to us or anything like this. It's just too, but like the propaganda with Saddam Hussein, that was good propaganda. And then they did a lot of the things that you're talking about. Like they would lay out, okay, this is all we need to do, and then this is going to happen. And then, there was like a major threat. Oh, don't get me wrong, all of this was lies, but they had a major threat. Saddam Hussein has nuclear weapons, and he's in bed with the terrorists. He's about to hand off a nuke to the terrorists, and they're going to nuke Kansas. And all we got to do is go in there. It'll take a couple weeks, and this is what they said. The propaganda for those my age, now that I'm 50. They can remember, was that we will be greeted as liberators. The war will be a cakewalk. It'll be paid for in oil, and democracy will sweep the region. It's like, this is what people were told. And they were told this by the experts. And this was like, oh, okay. Now, if you're going to imagine just saying, if you, before the age that we live in today, because we're talking like 2002 now, there is no social media. I don't know. Did any social media exist in 2002? I don't think so. I don't even think there was MySpace, but compared to today, certainly there was no social media. There weren't smartphones. There weren't podcasts. There weren't, and there was a large degree of trust in institutions, certainly compared to today. And so if you could imagine being told, if you tell someone, on one hand, the threat is that America could get nuked. And then on the other hand, this is going to be an easy war. Look, we had already fought a war in Iraq in 1991, the Persian Gulf War, and it was over quickly with almost, I think, no American casualties, or certainly minimal American casualties. And so you could see where it would be, hey, dude, all we got to do is go do another little one of those things, and we're taking this huge threat off the table, and it's going to be great. We're going to be greeted as liberators. It won't cost us a thing, and democracy will sweep the region. That's good propaganda right there. Well, okay, I guess that's enough for me to support. I guess maybe you could say 15 days to flatten the curve was the last good propaganda that we had, because that is, again, it's a reasonable buy-in. Yeah, it sucks to miss 2 weeks of work, but if missing 2 weeks of work is going to mean that, a grandma isn't dying in a stairwell, most of the American people go, okay, I'll do that, It's not just that they don't have any propaganda like that for these wars. It's that they know they can't. Like, they don't have the mechanism by which to sell that propaganda, and nobody is going to listen to them saying, no, listen, this is what's going to happen. Like this, and this, and it's all going to be great. Nobody's buying that anymore.
It's like
so
selling a Tyson fight after the Jake Paul incident. So,
yes,
it's like the 80s or 90s. We've watched Tyson, knock out everyone. That's our World War II. We were very successful in World War II. But then after the streak of Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, North Korea, you start putting up a bunch of losses, and you start telling us, oh, yeah, we can get this done, no problem. People are like, not so sure about that. Sounds like you're just trying to make some money.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. The Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, it's like you would never, because before that fight, you could show pictures of Mike Tyson hitting the bag and go, oh, that looks like Mike Tyson to me, man. Like, what we get in there might be Mike Tyson. But once you've seen him in there, you're like, oh, yeah, he's 60. He's not. We're not going to see Mike Tyson again. You're not going to convince me that, like, yeah, maybe 27-year-old Mike Tyson's going to get in the ring. It's like, no, he's not. And, so there's an interesting parallel there. The other thing is, just because you mentioned it, the stuff with the tariffs has also, it does seem like, you're right that it does, while so many people, and this is a major problem that we have right now, is that, like, I supported Donald Trump in this last election. I think there's many people who supported Donald Trump in 2024 who didn't support Donald Trump necessarily in 2020 or in 2016. Certainly he got, he won the popular vote for the first time. He got millions more votes than he got in 2016. And obviously this is, exemplified by so many of the high profile people who supported Donald Trump who didn't support him in the past, like Bobby Kennedy and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and just a lot of people who like came over this. And I think like this represents millions of people who were kind of in this camp where it's like, look, we recognized, in 2024 last year that like several of the dynamics had changed. and you kind of reassessed it and you went, all things considered for the country, I think it's really important that Kamala Harris lose and that Donald Trump win this election. But that is very different than the people who are just like blindly loyal to Donald Trump no matter what. And what you end up getting is the same thing we saw in the first term, which is that even when Trump supporters can't defend Trump's policy, they have to go to this 4D chess thing. It's like, no, you don't understand. It's this giant plan, where every reaction to his action is already accounted for, and then he's going to react to their reaction, and it's all going to come out the way Trump wants it. And it's just, for me, look, I'm not saying there have been cases before where I thought what Donald Trump was doing was very reckless, and then it kind of resulted in something where I was like, oh, okay, maybe he was working on something here. The one that comes to mind was him talking all types of shit to Kim Jong-un and then getting him to the table. Now, ultimately, him having John Bolton as his national security advisor killed the whole deal, but I'll still, gladly admit, hey, he did talk a lot of shit and then get this guy to the table, so maybe there's something to that. However, after living through 2020, this is really what broke, for me of that. It's like, now you can't convince me that it's always some 4D chess and he's always smarter than everybody else in the room, because it does seem like a lot of times he just gets rolled by the other people around him who are like, manipulating him. And I will say with the tariff thing, it just doesn't seem like there's this great big plan here. It seems like they threatened something that they couldn't really follow through with, which to me seems like very bad negotiating. That's like a rule of thumb, almost like just in life in general. You never want to really threaten something that you're unwilling to follow through on. It's a good rule of parenting as well. Don't threaten something you're not actually willing to do. Like if you're going to be like, you do this one more time, no dessert tonight, and then they do it one more time. And then when dessert time comes, you're like, all right, just give them dessert. It's like, well, then stop saying that. Don't say that unless you're actually willing to do it. But then with this, it does just seem, and then eventually they just, right, like you said, kind of like, well, this is going to actually be bad for us, so we'll back off of it. And, I guess the thing, I think me and you were talking about this recently too, but my major thing that I just think is so, it's really unfortunate. And, we knew that there were going to be disappointments. Anytime you support a politician, especially one who might actually win, you're always, there's going to be disappointment involved. The only time in politics that you can ever support someone and not be disappointed at all is when you're supporting a person who has no chance of winning. That's pretty much always the case. But the thing, I guess, that's upsetting about the Trump administration is that it did seem like there was actually it was plausible, maybe even reasonable, to think that there was a decent enough chance that this guy who had been so profoundly burned by this corrupt system might actually be there to fight that corrupt system. Now, I don't think any of us had any illusions that after 4 years of Donald Trump, we were going to have seen the CIA abolished and the FBI abolished and the Federal Reserve audited and government spending cut by $3 trillion. And none of us thought this would be the case. But we did maybe cautiously have some optimism that maybe we could move an inch in that direction, maybe even a few inches in that direction. And what you're seeing already is just, it's like, oh, these are all distractions, and this isn't even, it's not that we're not even thinking of moving in that direction. None of these things are even on the table. Part of this is again that you see no effort to prosecute the criminals within the government. I mean, it really is wild that between the people that Donald Trump has as like department heads and at high posts, he's got Bobby Kennedy, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard in there. I mean, some of the people who have been the most eloquent and passionate explainers of how criminal our government's been over the last few years. And yet there's still no move. But what we are doing is deporting every Israel critic who's, not a citizen. We're getting rid of them. It's always like, and look, I feel like the same thing with the tariffs. It's like emblematic of that same problem, that the real issue here is, and as I've said before, and I think that probably there are some libertarians who like fail to kind of address the first part of this. But like I've said many times, it is an outrage, an absolute outrage, like one that should get you white hot mad, that our government subsidizes countries, including their defense, puts them under our nuclear umbrella of protection, which is, there's a lot of countries that fall under this, right? And then those same countries, their governments will turn around and tariff American products. I mean, that is an outrage, okay? But then it's also still the case that at the very foundation, a tariff is just a tax on trade, and that's just about as stupid as a tax on work. So when you think about it, it's like, so we're making it a crime to be productive. We're making it a crime to work, and now we're making it a crime to trade with others, and the punishment is a fee, a fine. And this is just, it makes no economic sense at all. But the real heart of the issue is that people will go, okay, this is unfair to the American worker. Like and what they see as unfair to the American worker is that other countries, be it Mexico or China or wherever, they undercut us by, paying people wages that are far, far lower than people in America would accept. And therefore they can charge much less for their products, and it puts our companies out of business or something like that. And that in itself, I just think is wrong. And that, like, look, by economic theory and good economic theory, this happens all the time. If other people take work off of your plate and do it for much cheaper, then that frees you up to go do more productive work. Now, the problem we're having in modern day America is that people aren't seeing that more productive work. So they're going, yeah, well, listen, this used to be a big steel mill town, and now the 3 mills closed, and now there's nothing here. So that doesn't seem like an improvement. We'd rather have these jobs that you used to be able to support a family off of. But the problem there is not that we're trading with the world. That's not the issue. And if that was the issue, then why wouldn't we solve that by, again, just forget even the tariffs, just make it illegal to trade with the rest of the world? Why isn't anyone, suggesting that? Or much, much higher permanent tariffs? The main problem that unfortunately nobody in the Trump administration is going to take on, what's actually like devastated the American working class, is that the American working class has to carry the biggest government in the history of the world on its back. That's the major problem. The major problem is that, unlike all of these other countries, the American worker has to carry the American empire on its back. The $10 trillion that we've spent maintaining this empire in the last 20 years, that's all at the expense of the American people. That you have to pay, you essentially have to pay for this through taxes, through debt, and through inflation. That you carry that entire burden on your back. And if you really want to solve that problem, we should be rolling back the empire, which we were never supposed to be to begin with. We were always supposed to be a republic. And the truth is that some Chinese guy who's working for $1.50 a day is not what's putting the burden on the American working class. It's the American government. But I just don't see, I don't see any understanding of that. And I certainly don't see any political will to actually take that on. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Paint Your Life. Both Mother's and Father's Day is coming up, and I'm telling you, I already got one of these for my wife, but it's the best gift. You can now get a professional hand-painted portrait created from any photo at a truly affordable price. It's an unforgettable gift that will be cherished and loved for many years. You can upload photos to create anything you can imagine. You can put yourself in a location you've always wanted to visit. You can add a lost loved one to a special occasion to create the portrait of your dreams. Lots of options. You choose the artist, you choose the art medium. You could choose oil or acrylic or watercolor or charcoal or more. Then you select from a variety of quality frames. You can also communicate directly with the artist to ensure that the portrait is painted just like you wanted it. You get a hand-painted portrait in as little as 2 weeks. It is meaningful, personal, and always heartwarming. Check them out right now. And to get 20% off and free shipping, all you got to do is text the word problem to 87204. That's problem to 87204. Simply text the word problem to 87204 to get 20% off at Paint Your Life. Celebrate the moments that matter most. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. All right, let's get back into the show.
I think that's well said, and a lot of stuff just gets mixed in with the tariffs for concessions on it. Well, that's a gamble, but that's not saying that
Right.
hey, we need centralized government factory workers as a policy. Like, people seem to kind of, you know what I mean? Like, you might say, hey, we've got a problem that China's stealing too much of our intellectual property, and so tariffs but that's not the conversation. The conversation is people seem to be bought into, hey, I want my good factory job, and tariffs are what's going to create it. And I don't think that exists in economic reality. I think the reason why you're not going to find your good factory job is probably because of inflation. And if you have a good factory job, they probably rely on imports such as cheaper steel or otherwise, so you can work in your auto manufacturing or something that's a little bit up kind of the productive chain. Now, that's not true across the board, but I'm willing to bet that most factory jobs in the United States of America are probably actually benefiting from trade and the cheaper goods that we're able to get here.
Yes. Well, yeah, I think that's 100%. And I think that there's already been examples of what you're saying in these tariffs where like they figured out that like, oh, shoot, we're tariffing components that American manufacturing needs in order to manufacture things. And it's just, again, it's just, I think it's a bad understanding of economics to think that any of this stuff and any more than like, it's the great old, and I always blank this. I got to go look this up because I reference it enough that I should have that. But it was when Milton Friedman was visiting one of the former Soviet bloc countries.
Right.
Yeah. There he goes, he goes, why are they digging with shovels? Why don't they have excavators here? And they go, he goes, no, it's a jobs program. And Milton Friedman goes, so then use spoons. It's just like there's a lot of times in economics, there's like these logical understandings that once they click with you, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. I get why I was thinking about this all the wrong way. Because if you really felt this way, then like you should be a full-on Luddite. Like you should be against any technological improvement. You should like be like, oh my God, like you should be against the freaking factories. Because the factories were putting all the agricultural work out of business, like there was, if you go to like a poor enough, like primitive enough economy, you're going to get full employment. That's what people like. They like to apply like today's morals or today's moral standards to, like times where we were much poorer. And so it's easy for people today to look back and be like, oh my God, they had child labor back then. Like they had 9-year-olds working. And it's like, yeah, the reason why they had child labor, the reason why, say, like in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, why child labor was so accepted is because child labor had been the way of the world for all of history before that. Before the Industrial Revolution, it was all like it was all backbreaking agricultural work, or mostly. And the norm was that as soon as you were able-bodied, you started working. Because if you didn't live that way, then people starved to death. So it was just kind of like no one ever thought of like, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no moral question when it's do this or starve to death. And so it was like the industrialization is what put a lot of those jobs out of business, but we'd still all recognize, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's like, because we're living at a higher standard now. That's what you want. And I think there's something very unfortunate where, listen, I I think NAFTA was bad and GATT and all these things. This is all just like centralized managed trade stuff. Ron Paul did a great job breaking all that down back in the day. But the truth is that while there was this period of kind of globalization, and when I say globalization, I don't even mean politically, I just mean in terms of like global trade. While there was that period, there was also this gigantic increase in the size and scope of the US federal government and this, these forever wars that we've spent trillions and trillions of dollars on. And then when you look at that and it all doesn't work out, I think too many people are blaming the free trade and not looking at the major thing that's just been this incredible burden on the American worker. So hopefully people start to wake up to that. You're not going to get
rid of the free trade without going backwards, because I think like 95% of the rare earth minerals that we're using as key components in technology are not in this country. So you're going to have to trade for something. So at some point, what you're really just advocating for is a centralized government policy to create more factory jobs. And was that really the dream? Was that really your dream in life? I think you just want a job that pays you well, and you're wondering what's going on that I don't have a job that pays well, or specifically for men, which, by the way, I'm one of these people. I prefer working with my hands. I wish like I'd learned carpentry or mechanic or something else to have done in the years where I was working sales, office jobs, and all that nonsense that is absolutely soul-sucking, did not play to my strength in any capacity. School did not play to my strength in any capacity. So I understand why people like look at it and go, hey, I'm willing to work hard and I want to show up and be able to just, work with my hands and work hard. Like I get the complaint, but I think the idea that a centralized government policy to create more factory jobs, it's just not going to work. It's going to be the windmills that are falling into the ocean, or the solar plants that the Democrats were obsessed with that have all gone defunct. I think hundreds of billions of dollars were wasted amongst the Biden and Obama administration in pursuit of green energy. That's what centralized policies look like.
Yep. No, 100%. Okay, listen, we will, I'll try to take a couple questions from the chat. If you guys want to throw them in there, I'll jump to them. By the way, if you want to watch the show live and uncensored, ad-free, we're always streaming directly to partoftheproblem.com. All of our shows go live there. If you want those shows, go sign up over at partoftheproblem.com, and then you could be in the chat and get some questions answered.
Content. We do a whole other episode every week.
That is very true. Yes, that's true. We do most weeks. We make up for it when we miss them. We just did a live from Chicago episode that is only available to subscribers. And yes, we have every week we do a members only episode. So if you want to get all that stuff, you got to go sign up. So if you guys want to throw your questions in the chat, I will try to get to a few of them. But while we're waiting for that. So what is this? By the way, I have not very deeply been following this latest Pete Hegseth drama, but it does seem like it's being reported that he had another Signal conversation about military attacks in Yemen, and that evidently family members of his got added to this Signal chat. What have you seen of this, Rob?
So the detail that's unclear to me is how this came to light, how they found out. I mean, the last time it was because they accidentally added a reporter and the guy reported on it. But now it's being reported by, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, everybody, that he had another Signal conversation going with his, I know for sure his wife, and I believe some other people, and the same details that were in the other conversation with the, people who are actually a part of the security apparatus, or the big wigs, your Tulsi Gabbards, your head of the CIA. Apparently that conversation was also happening with family members. So sounds like I don't know, just sounds sloppy and more of a security breach, and the kind of thing that you might want to button up.
It's interesting, because the one thing that's kind of funny to me about it was always it's just kind of like, you're like, well, look, he didn't add an Atlantic reporter. So you're like, we're doing a little bit better, because he just added his wife and his mom or whatever. That is an improvement. Now Pete Hegseth is claiming that this is a false story and that it's just the enemies of Donald Trump that are accusing him of this. I find something interesting about the political dynamic there. Like there is, and this in a way, in terms of politics, like I'm not saying in terms of like what's right or wrong just to regular people. But there is something where the Democrats and the corporate media have handed the Trump administration this perennial excuse that, you know, all these guys are just liars who are trying to make us look bad. And that does have legs to it, because to any reasonable person looking at it, they'd go, yep, that sure does seem to be the case. And that sure has been the case a bunch. It's a little bit tougher to play that, to use that card when you just got caught doing this exact thing. Just makes it a little bit harder to be like, this is just how they always smear us. And you're like, no, but like last time you guys definitely did this. So I don't know. It's just hard to be dismissive of the allegation that you did the exact thing you just did once again. Then it's very hard to use that defense when you just got caught doing it. That's, I suppose, all I'll say. Yeah, pretty amazing, though. While it does seem like some other people have been drummed out of the Pentagon, Mike Waltz skates free after the most, like, the biggest fuck up you could imagine, putting a Trump-hating fake journalist on a group chat with all of the highest levels of Trump's government.
I think at the moment Trump doesn't want to admit any mistakes or fault, and so he's not looking to have to fire anybody.
Yes, I think that's right. Okay, so here's some questions. All right, Dave, who do you think is presenting the best, most fair, least strawman pro-Israel argument these days? Ooh, me. Yeah, I don't know if it's exactly a pro-Israel argument. You know, that's a really tough question. And, you know, I might be not the best person to ask about this, particularly right at this moment in my life, because, man, I could give you a long list of people presenting the worst, you know, most straw man arguments, but I don't know. I'd be interested to hear from you guys. Who do you think presents the best pro-Israel argument, the best, most honest and fair pro-Israel argument? I don't know. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Brunt. These guys, they just sent me a pair of their work boots. They are amazing. They're really beautiful. They're very comfortable. They're great for working outdoors. If you're looking for a great pair of work boots, make sure to go check them out. Work boots used to mean sacrificing comfort or durability. If they felt good, they don't last long. And if they lasted, they'd wreck your feet. Brunt Workwear finally ended that trade-off, designing boots that withstand the toughest job sites while feeling as comfortable as your favorite sneakers. These might be the most comfortable work boots on the planet, but they also deliver real performance on the job, whether you need waterproof, safety toe, or soft toe, pull on or lace up, they've got you covered. They're so confident these boots will blow you away that they even let you try it on the job risk-free. And right now, for a limited time, our listeners can get $10 off at bruntworkwear.com when they use the promo code PROBLEM. All you do is go over to bruntworkwear.com and make sure you use the promo code PROBLEM, and you're all set. And after you buy, do us a favor. When they ask where you heard about Brunt, let them know it was from the Part of the Problem podcast. Brunt didn't just make a durable work boot. They've reinvented comfort for the hardest workers out there. And for a limited time, our listeners can get $10 off. Once again, just go to bruntworkwear.com. Use the promo code PROBLEM. All right, let's get back into the show. You know, I will say this, as much as much as there, you know, like I've said before, there's such a gap between the people who actually consume his work and those who don't. But I think Daryl Cooper in Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem actually probably presented the best argument. And when you're talking about this, you're saying the most fair. And I think what you're saying is the most honest. When you say the least straw man, like the most honest. And I think that he probably did. And that there is something compelling about it. And the thing is that in order to really present it the best way, in the most honest way, then you also have to admit the crimes that the Zionist settlers and the Israelis committed against the Palestinian population there. But you can also present it in a way where it's like, you know, look, like I always said, and I think this is this is like when history is done right, like when you know, and I don't care about all these people who go like, oh, Daryl Cooper's not a real historian or something like that. And that's the same, that Daryl Cooper will say that too. He'll go, I'm just a history nerd who reads a ton about this stuff and likes telling stories, you know, but he does history better than 99% of historians do. But what you want to do is kind of like get people to understand that the history was made up of real people who are human beings, just like me and you are human beings, who and they had all the complexities that come with that. They had their, you know, these were, as he likes to say a lot, these were once 3-year-olds, you know what I mean, who were like cute little monkeys, like my little 3-year-old, and were just innocent little kids. And they had a lot of circumstances and different things thrown at them, and they became these figures and they did these things. And then to understand that there was a context, there was a time period, there were a lot of different things going on that informed their decision making. And I think that, like, if you take something like the creation of the state of Israel, even for, say, like people like who are critics of Israel, like myself, it's easy today to say, like, just tell the story and be like, okay, well, like, they, you know, the creation of the state of Israel involved kicking 700,000 to 800,000 Arabs out of their land and making them refugees. Now, that's true, and I don't think you have to lose that point or lose any of your kind of like sympathy for those people, or any of your understanding of how this created a tremendous amount of hatred and resentment and all of this. But I do think that, like, and this is one of the things that Daryl Cooper does very well in the series, is like, okay, this started in 1947. Let's think about 1947. Where were we exactly in history? And the fact that Jews had been through hundreds of years of pogroms in Europe and had been like horrifically mistreated. The fact that the Holocaust had just wrapped up a couple years earlier and millions of Jews were killed by the Nazis. The fact that the Allies had gone to total war, including targeting of civilian centers, just slaughtering people by the millions, you know, like bombing cities when the men were out at war. And you know damn well that who's left there are the women and children, dropping nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, firebombing of Japan and Dresden and all this stuff. And that currently, as this is going on, Stalin is like ethnically cleansing the ethnic Germans out of Eastern Europe. This is after, in the war, he sent his men on a giant raping spree through all of Eastern Europe. So it's like, with all of that in the background, you could understand where like some Zionist settlers were like, hey, who's going to tell us we can't drive a few 100,000 people off their land? You know, like, okay, yes, we need to create a Jewish state. They had convinced themselves, and you could certainly understand why at the time, they had convinced themselves that, like, this is the only way we're ever going to be protected, is if we have a government of our own that is dedicated to protecting Jewish people. And we're going to have to break a few eggs in order to make that omelet. But you look around the world and it's nothing but broken eggs. You can understand where they were like, who the hell is going to get on their high horse and lecture us right now about doing this? Not like, so like that to me is kind of like the best steel-manned version of their case. And it comes from Daryl Cooper, you know, kind of ironically, seeing as how he's portrayed these days in some pro-Israel circles. Okay, anything you want to add, Rob, or should we go to another question?
Go to the next one.
Dave, do you think global trade is possible without American military subsidizing everyone else's security? Yes, 100%. The two absolutely do not rely on each other. It's like if we abolished NATO and said we're not in like these war guarantees with Europe anymore, we're not subsidizing their defense, we could still trade things with them. You in no way need one for the other. And in fact, right, like what is the proof of that is that even countries outside of that umbrella, we trade with them. China's a hostile foreign power and we still trade with them all the time. I mean, we may not trade much with Russia anymore, but we certainly were before. You don't have to have a war guarantee or have subsidized or be subsidized by the American military to trade, because what happens is it's not governments trading with each other, it's companies. And the companies trade for a simple reason, because they need the stuff in order to make a profit. So yes, of course you can have that. In the same way that, like, you know, someone like we could trade between the states, even though we have different police forces that are protecting our property rights, supposedly infringing more than protecting, but are at least tasked with the responsibility to protect. And you could have trade between countries that have different militaries. None of those things are dependent on the other. All right. Do you, Dave, do you believe that we've figured out 0 point energy and the government is keeping it on the shelf? I have no idea. Any take on that, Rob?
I don't know what 0 point energy is, but would a free market have brought us to nuclear advancements? Probably. I mean,
yeah.
The Army's using the small modular nuclear reactors, and we fought a bunch of wars over oil, and we dug up energy rail lines, not I think bus lines or shuttles or whatever, and replaced them with roads that everyone would be in cars. So do I think if we had an entirely free market, if we'd have this just giant working off a gas economy or whatever our current energy policy is? Absolutely not. I think in a free market, energy would look a lot different and probably have a lot more nuclear as a 0 point energy. I've never seen that term before. I think he's referring to like a nuclear fusion or something. But I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I mean, I'm sure the government has a bunch of stuff that they're not sharing with the rest of us, but I have no idea what that might be. All right, next question. We could make this the last one. How do you think a primary candidate in either party would do in the 2028 election if they ran solely on being anti-Israel? We'll go with the establishment on anything else. Do you think the people in the U.S. hate Israel enough for any degree of success with that strategy? Well, no. I mean, I don't think that would be a good strategy, and I don't think that's what we should support. You know, it's like being the way to make it work, or not even the way to make it work. What's right, what you would want to see is, like, you don't even want to necessarily be anti-Israel. You know, I had some people. I don't think I even ever responded to this, but I said in one tweet recently, or someone called me the anti-Israel guy, and I was like, I'm not even anti-Israel. I'm just pro-America. You know, Now, some people gave me shit on that who were like, you should be anti-Israel. But I don't really see it that way, in the same sense that I don't think describing me as anti-American would be at all accurate, even though I've been very critical of the US government, and for the exact same things that I'm critical of the Israeli government for. I mean, one of the major things I'm critical of the US government for is for funding and arming Israel, right? I mean, so, like, I just don't think, like, my starting point is never to be, like, against the people of any nation, or against, like, the nation itself. I'm critical of, like, what governments do, and I'm critical of what the Israeli government is doing to the Palestinians and what the Israeli government is doing to the American people, for that matter. But I don't think any of that should ever be animated, you know. And look, there are people who could make arguments, but I just never, I always find all of these arguments to be unsatisfactory to me. Or, you know, if you want to get into the business of, like, demonizing the people themselves, you can do it to almost every group of people, and it's just not productive. And I don't think it's right. You know, but if you want to demonize the people of Israel, and you could be like, look at the lack of protests over what they're doing in Gaza. I mean, there have been some, but not nearly enough. You find man on the street interviews where random Israelis are talking about Arabs. There's no shortage of that, and it's pretty disgusting, the things a lot of them say. But then again, you can also do that to the people in Gaza, and this is what almost everybody who supports the war does. look at them. They're celebrating as this hostage is taking. Look, Hamas won this election. Look at this opinion poll where they supported this. It's like, you could also do that within America. I'm old enough, Rob, now that I'm 50, I'm old enough to very vividly remember when every single right winger in this country supported destroying Iraq, and you were some type of homo if you didn't agree with them. I could certainly do it to liberals and left wingers in America through COVID. Look how many of them would have supported. But, people are propagandized. People defend their government. People compartmentalize things. I've never made it my thing to like attack the people. And so if you're running a campaign that was just animated by like hating a foreign country, that's not good. What you want to be animated by is loving your country. And your beef with Israel should be that they're degrading our country. That would be the winning message. And so to your point, if you're like, oh, I'm willing to go with the establishment on anything else, but I'm being I'm being anti-Israel, well, then screw that. You're still with the establishment that's totally fucking over your country. And that I don't think would be successful. Then you're going to get all of the baggage that comes with being critical of Israel and none of the backing, because people are going to be like, oh, you're just a tool of the establishment. But what I think might be the more interesting question is that, imagine a Donald Trump type campaign, but also imagine it actually being America first. Like actually being willing to say, yeah, we're not fighting wars on behalf of Israel anymore. Or we're not backing up Israel in their wars. You could even, I think the best way to do it would be to even do it from a pro-Israel point of view and be pro-Palestinian too. Just be like, I love all these people. We just want them to get along. We're rooting for everyone to have success. You could even do it in a way where you said, we'll defend Israel. Like you could do it in a way where you went, look, we're not going to let anyone destroy Israel. So if anybody in the region has any plans of that, let's not do that. Now, forget, splitting hairs over whether that's the correct position or the libertarian position, which I repeat myself, but just on the scale of outrages, like Rob, you remember last year when Iran sent all of those missiles at Israel, and there was a team of nations that came together to defend Israel. It was mostly America, but there were European countries, and then there were also some of the Sunni sock puppet countries, the Saudis and Jordan and these guys. They all helped Israel defend itself. Of all of the critics of Israel, obviously of us or whoever else, how many people were really outraged by that? It's like, okay, fine. Yes, don't let these missiles fall on people. I don't like any government, intervention, but of all the government interventions, that one's not bad. That's not really the issue. The issue isn't whether we're going to help defend Israel nearly as much as are we going to help Israel aggress against all their neighbors. And that's what we should get out of the business of doing. There's any final comment? I'll give it to you, Rob.
Well, I would state it a little bit differently. Foreign suffering is not going to be a primary driver for an American political campaign. And if you make it so if you were to come up and you said, I have no policy other than what's happening in Gaza is terrible, so we're not supporting Israel anymore, and someone else is pitching for a better economy, pitching for closing the border, it's not a sale to the American people. We don't care enough about take any issue of foreign suffering, and if you said, hey, what's going on is immoral and this is going to be the central issue of my campaign, nobody cares. And on the same note, if the central part of your campaign is just where you don't want to support Israel, nobody cares. If you want to change the pitch to we're not fighting foreign wars, we're not sending all this money out of the country, and we're being American first, well, that's already not your question of running solely on being anti-Israel.
Right,
I don't think the country wants to live well here, and I think they look at the money and resources being spent on Israel, and that's part of a larger problem that people take issue with, or they look at, basically our involvement over there and what's happening in Gaza, and I think people look at the morality of that, but people want to live well here. I don't think if you were to make that the sole part of your campaign, either off the human suffering, it's just not a major driver. You could take any issue that faces any country in the world and go, I'm running a campaign that we have to raise the wages over the Chinese workers. Good luck in America with that one. Hey, guys, I won't even touch another foreign policy until I make sure everyone in Yemen is fed. Good luck with that one.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We're going to wrap up there. Thank you guys very much for listening. We will be back tomorrow with a brand new episode. Catch you then. Peace.